Hi, I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Hello, Moon to Moon. I'm coming to you today with a solo episode under a full moon in Leo, squaring Uranus and Taurus. I'm really excited to have a moment to feel myself connecting to my voice in the field of both Moon to Moon, the podcast, as well as inside the field of the Magician's Table 2025. I am craving these days so much moments of dropping in. This business of having a puppy makes me more scattered. You know, it's like harder to hold a long time inside of the frequency of a thing because there's only so long in nap time. And I find myself just like really craving that feeling of being hooked in and in the frequency in a closed container for a little while. So I'm celebrating that. Thank you for being here with me. I wanted to create an episode with the topic, The Failed Magician, last year. And it just didn't happen. I never created it. I ended up speaking about this topic that I'm going to be sharing with you today at the initiation for the Magician's Table last year, and created a little thing for students to learn more on this topic. And when I was feeling into what would be exciting for me to create for the Magician's Table promo this year, I really was like, I want to talk about the failed magician. So I'm going to be defining that and sharing with you how I came into this picture of the failed magician, which I'll be sharing with you as a part in all of us, like a part among who could even count parts. We have so many parts, you know, but we all, I would say, have a failed magician. And I find it really helpful to be in relationship to this framework, a relationship to this title, so that I can always be in relationship with this part of me, and it won't operate without my eyes on it, basically, unconsciously. I find it really helpful to be in relationship to this archetype as someone who deeply, sincerely wants to be in personal creative connection to my magic. We can associate that today with Leo, and who also wants that personal creative alchemy, that which births from the cauldron of change that is magic, to be of service to the collective, to be of service as a frequency in my ecosystems and out in the world in a mycelial way, which we could associate today with Aquarius, because today we have a strong polarity with this full moon, which is Leo Aquarius. And I've always felt that the Magician's Table is very Leo Aquarius. It's really fixed sign, I would say. And we'll see if I tease that out. So, I want to bring in this archetype because as someone who has a truly sincere desire to be tapped in to my magic for both personal and collective reasons, purposes, it's important to me to grow skill in noticing what types of things can come forward that would knock me out of that polarity in ways that are skillful, loving, sincere, compassionate, exciting, fun, joyful, truthful. And I feel like having a relationship with my failed magician has been and continues to be very supportive. And it's also very supportive in terms of being able to notice it at play in others or in the world so that I can call it what it is, One of the things that I feel is true about magic, which reminds me of a Montessori saying I learned when I had a tiny little toddler in Montessori, which is that a thing doesn't exist until we give it a name. Very powerful thing. It's one of the powerful things to me about esoteric languages is we're giving names to all kinds of things that once that we know these names like the Magician, the Hermit, Saturn, Virgo, we have these names, Leo, Aquarius. Having these names allows us to see what exists and to then be in relationship to what exists. But how can we be in relationship to something if we're not really in relationship, aware of its existence? And we give things an existence by giving them a name. So this concept is not meant to be fear mongering. It's not meant to suggest that if you don't join the Magician's Table, you're going to fail in your magic. Because what I'm saying is that we always will have a failed magician with us all the time. And that the more we're in relationship to that part of us, the more supportive we can be in our magic in the world. And so yes, inside the Magician's Table, this and many, 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 many more frameworks are going to be available for you to be playing with, to be interfacing with yourself, Leo, and in community, Aquarius. And I'm sharing this one here so that we can all play with this one together. Okay. Let me feel into a definition. As a Neptunian person, it's always painful for me to give definitions because it feels like it's locking me down into something that I want to keep diffuse. Let's see what comes forward. The failed magician in us is a part of us that has their eye on and is fearful of naturally and thus very protective against the idea of failure. And it's a part of us that, because of the attention on failure, the specter of failure grows, because that's what happens with attention as magical people. Whatever we're putting our attention on will grow. And when your eyes are on and your energy is turned toward concept failure, that will grow so much that one's behaviors, biases, mental ways of engaging with yourself, talking to yourself, thinking about other people, thinking about reality, thinking about possibility, it will become consumed with protecting against what will feel really painful, which would be failure. So at its heart, to me, is a young part. It's a young part of us that's guarding against a bad feeling called failure. And failure is a big word, so part of being engaged with failed magician to me is identifying what is failure to me and bringing that into present time, because our child self, the part of us that's merged with a failed magician archetype, is going to probably have a really different picture about failure than the full multi-self version of us who's in connection to one's soul and to one's guidance on the other side, who has a very different idea of what failure is. Does it even exist? Is it even possible to fail? From a soul perspective, is it even possible to fail? But this young version of us definitely thinks it's possible. And the pictures that may come up for us around that specter are probably going to all be different, depending on caregivers, conditioning, school experiences, and past experiences that we labeled failure, that we are now consciously or unconsciously guarding against and hypervigilant against. And so, to me, it's very soothing to not see this as something that I'm terrified of because I don't want to be a failed magician. It's no. I already have a failed magician. It's a part of me that's always here. And my job is to be in relationship to that part of me so that I don't act from her, him, them, and rather let them be in relationship with me as their larger caregiver who's helping them see reality in new ways. But I'm not interested in silencing them, banishing them, or pretending that they don't exist. So this very much sounds like parts work. If you're familiar with internal family systems, IFS, it is. It ties to energy healing, inner child healing practices that I learned before I learned IFS, because in a fascinating way, I learned that all from my energy healing teachers. And I found out about IFS later because IFS actually came through to Dick Schwartz, who created it in mystical ways from his guides, energy. And so I've been engaging with seeing myself as having all these parts for a long time. And folks who are in Unshaming Your Chart or who've taken the Moon to Moon class are familiar with me talking about this language, but I'm just speaking that here in case this feels new to you. So, origins. I would say that the failed magician relates to an archetype that I first heard about from Caroline Myss, who's an intuitive teacher, author. She wrote a book called Sacred Contracts. You may have heard of it. I invested in her self-paced class called The Language of Archetypes from Sounds True. I think 2018, maybe 2019. And I was obsessed. I mean, it was so good. It's so good. And what she posits, because this is when I was just like becoming obsessed with the idea of archetypes at this time, learning astrology, the tarot, getting into esoteric languages, deepening my studies of energy healing. And what she posits in this book, and by the way, Caroline Myss is not perfect, and I don't agree with 100% of what she says, which I would say about any source that I would ever share. What she posits is that we all have 12 primary archetypes. 12. Fascinating number. We all have 12 primary archetypes, and everybody has 4 that are the same. So we all have the same 4, and then everybody has a different other 8. And she is saying that if you can develop a relationship to these archetypes in yourself, like you will, quote unquote, unlock your potential or whatever type thing. Y'all know I'm not interested in that phrasing. But at the time, this was all just like very eye-opening for me. And one of the 4 that she says we all have is the inner saboteur, as in self-sabotage. And the section on working with your inner saboteur was extremely powerful to me. Like, whoa. As someone with lots of shame in my history and lots of stories about self-sabotage and self-undoing, this was fascinating to me. And one of the phrasings that came through that I'm sure I won't quote her exactly, but this is how it's like remained in my field over the years, was she said, the reason we self-sabotage is because we're terrified of our own power. Why are we terrified of our power? Because we know our world will have to change. And at the time, it was like, I'm going to need you to say that again. And one more time for the parts of me in the back, just like, what? We're terrified of our own power because we're afraid our world will change. Shit. And here I was at a time where I had created change, and I was uncovering my power. Like I was finding my power because I had allowed change to happen. It happened the reverse way. And I had been reprogramming my self-sabotaging patterns, habits in the process, kind of naturally. Like it was like change was the thing that allowed the power to come forward, and then the self-undoing patterns to shift. Now, since then, I have really embraced a more loving relationship to the phrasing self-sabotage from a trauma-informed perspective. I've learned from Luis Mojica that there is intelligence to what we might call self-sabotage in our younger selves, including like yesterday. And that the intelligence is that we didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the capacity to like not lie. We didn't have the capacity to tell the truth. We didn't have the capacity to be sober. We didn't have the capacity to hear what someone was telling us. We didn't have the capacity to respond in graceful ways. Like the idea is to give yourself some compassion for the fact that you didn't have capacity. This was a capacity thing, which relates to trauma, which is not your fault. And so we can know that there is a kind of innocence frequency that we can touch base with here to heal and repair from with our relationship to the word sabotage, self-sabotage, a saboteur. And there's also the responsibility of then becoming someone who looks for tools, skills, and teachers for learning how to grow capacity capacity to take on more sensation, the higher sensation of being in our power, and the high sensation of being with change, which is to say, the high sensation of being with magic, because magic is change. Magic is change. Okay, so then, same time period, I'm reading Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola-Estess. I had never read it till I was I was like 40 that year. You know, pretty great book to have drop into your lap when you're 40 and fresh out of a marriage. And absolutely obsessed with the Bluebeard story. Absolutely obsessed with Bluebeard. And in this story, there's like a naive girl who has older sisters, and they meet this man, Bluebeard. He's got a blue beard, and he's got a lot of money, and he's like basically enticing them and love bombing them and flirting with them. And the older sisters are like, he's kind of weird. I don't know about him. But the naive girl is like, he seems nice to me. And it's then she ends up marrying him, and gives her this huge castle to be in charge of. He gives her these keys, and he's like, you can open any door in the house, but you can't open that one. And then he leaves town. The sisters come and visit, and the older sisters are like, let's see what's in that room. And what's in that room is the skeletons of his dead wives. And once she sees what's inside this room, the key starts bleeding. Its blood is everywhere. It's all over her clothes. She can't get him out. And he comes back from his trip, and he's like, so how was it? And he's like, give me my keys. And he figures it out, and he's threatening to kill her. And she has to stall him and buy time. And she calls on her brothers to come. And eventually they come, storm the castle, and throw Bluebeard out the window and dismember him. It's a very gory horror story. So I like to tell it in Scorpio season. Fixed signs. And the way it's told through the analysis then of Pinkola-Estess is that we see all the characters as parts of us, like the naive parts, the wiser older sisters, the strong brothers, and Bluebeard as the failed magician. It's a part of us that doesn't want us to see the other parts of us that lay dead or dying, shoved in a closet because they haven't had a chance to live. And this just rollicked me as a framework for thinking about how our protector parts, here the failed magician, can become very oppressive and dominating and tyrannical and controlling. And they prey on the parts of ourselves that don't trust ourselves enough to protect ourselves against them. Like the parts of us that, in Pinkola-Estess' framing, that naive young girl in us is a part of us who was encouraged not to listen to their intuition by mother, by overculture, to just be nice, to just play nice, don't be difficult, accept what people give you, be pliable, be controllable, so that those in power can dominate you, which really rattled me because I recognize that in my history. Like I recognize the ways in which I felt by specific human beings, but over culture at large, patriarchy at large. Don't be difficult. Don't ask questions. Don't wonder about things. Just accept the gift of being taken care of and don't give us trouble. And that parts of us that are intuitive and wise to that, being encouraged for us to not trust them and to shove them aside. That would be the wiser older sisters in the story. So, in this framing, which is a more sinister version of one's failed magician that I practice in my day-to-day life, but it's important for just speaking through the origin stories, and for you to help you feel into this. Like, it speaks to the ways that our identification with a failed magician may relate to parts of ourselves that kind of took over when we felt ourselves to be disempowered. We felt ourselves to be silenced. We felt ourselves to be oppressed. We felt ourselves to not have agency or authority in our lives. You might be able to hear my dog in the background. So that she actually uses the terms failed magician in it. And I think that's where it really dinged in me. It kind of relates to me to a failed artist archetype. Not the same though. I feel like the word artist has its own kind of loadedness in our culture that relates specifically to what opportunities are and aren't available to artists and what failures and successes look like according to overculture for artists. I think in a high level, they're very much the same. But I think that on the earthly plane, we culturally have a different picture in our minds of what an artist is than we maybe do a magician. And so they're similar. They're both creative parts of us, but the pictures that may light up in terms of success or failure may be different, one to each person. And for me, as a teacher and mentor to mystics, to tarot readers, to energy healers, to psychics, to astrologers, I'm speaking broadly when I'm using the word magician to all those who are engaged with the intuitive arts as they create and share with culture. Taurus comes in when we think about how money is involved here. And when we think about how scarcity can be at play in our intuitive art sharing, our intuitive craft sharing. If there are pictures of, I'll never make money doing this, or no one would really pay me for this, then Taurus is going to come in here too. And Taurus is very involved in this full moon because the sun and moon are exactly squaring Uranus and Taurus. And that's a hard square. That's a difficult square when we second guess and we minimize and we shame desire for receiving, for our magic, for being in reciprocity, for being in exchange with our magic. That can really activate. That's the failed magician to me getting activated. In looking for reasons why it won't work, looking for reasons why it's not worth trying. Like moving energy from your own magic to thinking about what other people are doing, to comparing with others, to competing with others, to judging others, to blaming others. All of those are the moves of a failed magician part of us that are feeling disempowered and are not sure how to work with that energy because it's a young part of us that's looking for ways to keep us safe inside of a culture that has traditionally deeply, deeply devalued the intuitive and magical arts, along with all arts and craft. And so what do we do about this, right? To me, working with my failed magician is to be in commitment to hearing them and also holding to my devotions. To me, devotion is a frequency that empowers us, delights us, but especially focuses us when we otherwise feel disempowered. I just paused the recording to help Visby after his nap. Coming back to conclude, I was just wrapping up. That this year's theme for the Magician's Table is the devotion that's driving you. I'm inviting you, listener, to feel into the frequency of devotion. What does it feel like to be in devotion? And for me, this part of me is one of the most important parts of me that I can lean on when I feel afraid, when I feel worried, when I feel scarce, when I feel despair. Tapping into devotion feels so good. It feels so good. It feels so good to let it grow, to just get in there with the devotion and let it grow bigger and bigger and bigger until it's all that's around me. This year, I'm inviting magicians to come forward to the table who want to spend the entire spring in deep devotion frequency, in community with me, and inside this space that is the Magician's Table. I hope this exploration of the failed magician was supportive to you, whether you join us or not, an archetype to play with, a part of you to be in relationship with. And I'm sending everyone a big hug here at the full moon. If you're interested in joining us in the Magician's Table, you need to be on the wait list in order to get the link to apply. So you'll be able to access that through the show notes. And at the course page, all through, there's buttons. Put your name on the wait list. And then at the new moon in Pisces in 2 weeks, February 27th, I will be sharing the link to apply, and I will go through the applications and begin admitting magicians in the order received. So the earlier you get your applications in, the more likely that you will get first dibs on the cohort of your choice, because there's cohorts of 12. So it's limited seating. It's a limited seating offering. So please get your applications in. Then you'll hear right back from me, and I will support you in moving through the door, securing your spot, and joining us in this devotion frequency, which will feel so good, supporting us with the energies of 2025 and beyond. Thank you for listening. Cheers.